Hello and welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. We have a packed show for you today and we'll be diving into the omnibus bill and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Then we'll have an interview with Joe Shepard, the president of the United Rural Democrats, and we'll close with a discussion about the daylight savings time becoming permanent. All this and more in today's episode of the Waynesburg Effect. One of the biggest pieces of legislation of the year was passed earlier this month. The omnibus package that will keep the government funded for the rest of the fiscal year was passed at the last possible minute. Today, Scott Miller and Lachlan Loudon join me to discuss the impact of that bill. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Yep.
So Scott, we're going to start with you. Can you just give us a brief overview of the bill, like what's in it and how it affects the government?
So first of all, the bill itself is $1.5 trillion. Which is $88 billion more than last year, which we put in a little bit of inflation. I mean, obviously it's going to go up a little bit, but we spent $782 billion on defense, $730 billion just on non-defense programs within all of the departments. We also have a couple other smaller things inside of, like they call the CHIMP programs and stuff like that. That took up $15 billion. Then we took another $26 billion and put in relief programs. Like if we have wildfires in California, hurricanes and stuff like that, we put money aside for stuff like that. But also then we got to look at stuff of the agriculture. We have $25.1 billion inside of agriculture. We have energy and water combined, and we have $728 billion inside of that. We have Homeland Security. We have $57.5 billion inside of that. We have a bunch of different smaller bills inside of all of this that total up to all of that $1.5 trillion. We also have $13.3 billion going to Ukraine. So inside of all of the bill and the smaller bills, it all totals up to a big whopping $1.5 trillion.
So Lachlan, how does this bill change from what we had last year that funded the last fiscal year?
Well, last year, like Scotty said, $88 billion increased in this current 2022 omnibus that we're seeing here. And I mean, that's a lot. I mean, typically they don't increase that much, but we have inflation going on right now. And we also have a war that we're helping Ukraine, with some financial things there that increase $13 billion to Ukraine, like you said, which does, add to that overall $88 billion. And also, it's $50 billion higher than the Congressional Budget Office's most recent baseline. And then in line with last fiscal year, 2021, inflation has adjusted things. Just naturally, it's going to cost more to do a lot of this stuff, and COVID especially. Funding for COVID now that with vaccines and testing and everything, the government has to chip in a lot for that. Republicans initially weren't in for that, but now we obviously had to make a compromise as time was running out, which made this one a whopping $88 billion more expensive.
So I'm going to throw this next question to both of you, but we'll start with you, Scott. Some people have raised concerns that this is demonstrating that Democrats are having trouble running basic governing practices like keeping the government funded because the bill, it took up until the very last minute to get this passed. Democrats were literally about to leave for their House retreat when the bill was passed. So Scott, what's your take on it? What caused this bill to take so long to be passed, and do you think it's a warning sign for Democrats?
On my personal opinion, first of all, the bill is 2,741 pages, and when they first sent out hey, let's do a vote on it, they only gave 12 hours to read the bill, and I put up some facts and stuff. You're not going to be able to read that many pages in 12 hours. So I don't feel like they gave enough time for it. And then if you look inside, if you actually wanted to sit down and look at all the details, some of the facts, inflation, we went up about 6%, give or take. But when you look inside the bill, we have increases of 7.3%, 10.8%, 12%, 19%. They want to take their time and actually look into, why are we spending 7.3% more in agriculture than we did last year? Is it all because of inflation? Are they trying to get a little more out of them than what they actually need? So I feel like they just, they're trying to take their time to actually get into it. But I feel like they need to, slow down the process and actually look at it because, all them pages, I couldn't read all that in 12 hours. And if I did, I probably wouldn't retain over half of it. So I think they just need to actually take their time and put it in smaller portions, maybe do half and half, take the defense programs and do that towards the beginning of the year. And then once they settle on that, then move to non-defense programs. Or they just need to learn to settle down, not put so much information, get down to the facts and only put what they actually need inside the bills.
So Lachlan, to you, how does the bill getting passed at the last minute affect the way the Democrats are governing?
Yeah, well, I think there's plenty of blame to go around here. I mean, on both sides, really. You're going to hear Democrats, they're blaming Republicans, especially with COVID, as I touched on earlier, how they didn't want to spend all that money on COVID. That's going to, come back to the Republicans. That slowed it down a lot. Also, just the communication between the Democratic congressmen is just not congruent. I mean, you have Nancy Pelosi with the House of Representatives and Joe Manchin in the Senate. Joe Manchin actually wrote a letter to Nancy Pelosi, if you remember that. She did not read it. She didn't even know about it. And Joe Manchin ended up, voting against Build Back Better, voted, with Republicans on some of these spending bills that they wanted to pass, and it just ended up slowing things down. The process of it ended up taking longer because of things like this. We have bad communication, and that's something that I think is important to why it was so drug out. And also, like you said, with how long it was. I mean, how do you expect them to read this in 12 hours? I mean, I think some of my homework assignments have tight deadlines. This is 2,741 pages that you have 12 hours to read without sleeping or anything. I don't even think you could do that in 12 hours. That's impossible. And what I'm thinking is, for the future at least, it's going to be hard to look at this. I mean, we have the filibuster, which I'd like to think of the long bills as a reverse filibuster. It sort of makes people have to read it quicker, skim through it, maybe miss some details if that's what that invokes. And it could be a tactic used for the future. This bill is so long, just read through it. If you like what you see, vote on it. And that's, especially with the time restriction, almost like a reverse filibuster in a way. I mean, that's how I see it. It's a little bit dangerous, but again, I don't know if this is a trend that we're going to see continue in Washington with these long bills, and if it's a tactic that the lawmakers are going to keep using. I'm not sure.
Scott, you did some research on what individual congressmen are getting out of the bill. What congressmen are going to benefit from it, and what individual projects or specific groups and people getting in this omnibus bill?
Yeah, so I have just two main things. The one I don't have the actual rep for it, but the one I have, New York Rep Jamal Al-Bowman, he got $496,000 for health equity for pool improvements. I feel like that's a lot of money just for some pool improvements, but I mean, for anyone that actually owns a pool, I mean, it is expensive, but I don't know where that one's going to go. And then also I saw that Roger Williams University got equatable shellfish aquaculture, so they got money for stuff with shellfish. I mean, I know they use that for different research and stuff like that, but I mean, they got 1.6 million federal taxpayer dollars for that university. I mean, there's multiple other small things like that inside this bill. I mean, you just have to dig deep and see inside of each little appropriation bill, where actually is this money going to? And I feel like that comes along with a lot of the timeliness inside of the project.
And another one, for example, is Joe Manchin, who's already talking about some of the money he secured for his own district. But I want to go to you, Lachlan. Do you expect these representatives and senators, as they're up for re-election, to be really hitting this money hard and campaigning on it during their campaign for re-election?
I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, we are in an election year. Midterms, probably one of the most anticipated midterms we've had in a while. I mean, a lot's at stake here. We could see great shifts in power, and especially people like Joe Manchin, one of the most controversial Democratic senators out there, who has, been a main topic of discussion in the Senate, one of the great dissenter, I think, of our generation, really. He's been kind of like the Democratic version of like John McCain or Mitt Romney. I mean, he's been key to flipping a lot of these votes, voting with the Republicans in situations where he might be the only one. He's definitely going to, need to prove that, he's still going to be able to represent the people of West Virginia the way he has been. And, there's going to be a lot of people coming after him, too. I mean, he's going to have some stiff competition. There's a lot of reasons to not vote for Joe Manchin if you are a Democrat. And I think he's going to use this money. And I know I'm only talking about Joe Manchin here, but anyone, I mean, this can be a great opportunity to campaign with all of this new funding that's coming out. And it's a lot of funding. I know Republicans don't like spending a lot, but it is going to have to, it is going to come down to, how you best represent your state in those specific areas where the states can thrive.
Oh, great stuff, guys. When we come back, we'll be diving into the ongoing war in Ukraine. We are now entering the fourth week of the ongoing war in Ukraine as Russia continues to advance into the region. As the invasion continues to drag on, I'll again go to my panel to discuss some of the war and some of the consequences for it. So, Lachlan, we'll start with you. So far, Russia's advance into Ukraine has been extremely slow. Is that surprising to you?
At first, yes, very surprising. If you look at the sheer size and the military budget of Russia, it's insane. I mean, they're right up there with the U.S. However, if you look at some of the troop morale issues, there isn't really much there. I mean, they thought that they were on a training mission at first. That's what they were told. They didn't realize they were invading another country at first. And I don't really think that, Putin will even admit that, but like the Russian troops don't even know what they're doing. I mean, they're just being given orders and they're in the middle of the Ukrainian countryside and they're being told to storm Kyiv. I mean, if you look at some of the other things that have been said, the confusion that they have expressed, there was claims that Russian troops couldn't tell who to shoot. They were saying they look just like us. They didn't even know, who to target here. And also the stiff Ukrainian resistance, which Putin did not expect to find. When he came into Ukraine, originally there were those two independent territories that he claimed, or two independent regions that he said were independent. That's when the U.S. first recognized the invasion, but now he just sent everyone in, and Ukraine has been prepared. They've been ready for this since 2014. They've been expecting this, if as unfortunate as it is. But there's been stiff resistance that they did not even expect. The Russian soldiers didn't expect it, and then the Ukrainian morale. I mean, if you look at the stuff that with Zelensky, on the front lines, the ghost of Kyiv, all those, urban legends, whether they're true or not, you have really boosted the Ukrainian morale, and they have all been, given support from the rest of the world. I feel like it's definitely a mental battle. As corny as that sounds, it definitely comes down to that.
So you kind of touched on Putin and not expecting how stiff the resistance is. So Scotty, based on how the invasion has gone so far, do you think that it strengthens Putin's power in Russia, or do you think it's weakened it?
Oh, it's definitely weakening it. I mean, the first main problem with inside of Russia with Putin is he started trying to cut off all the media ties, trying not to show what's actually happening. I mean, there's videos outside from people, the Russian soldiers in Ukraine saying, "I thought we were on a training exercise," like Lachlan said. Like, they didn't tell us that we were actually going to be fighting. And word gets back to your country that your training exercise was actually a military action to go, kill people. That's not going to fly with, the Russians, the people actually inside of it. Now, Putin also is basically a dictator because He's supposed to only serve so many terms. Now he's, holding up, making all of his terms and stuff like that. So obviously there is no really elections or anything like that. So, but an uprising could possibly happen. There's also rumors that Putin's also taking like steroids, and they said that ever since he started taking them, he started getting more aggressive and starting to act a little funny. So he has that coming on him. The war, the media is making him out to look bad. There's already been some like small little a little riot in groups trying to tell Putin to stop the war, and he's just putting them in jail, treating them all terrible. So as like a city or as a whole country, they're looking all down on him, trying to think like, why do we let this guy run our country when the Ukraine's leader used to be a comedian, and he's showing strength in little numbers but holding up compared to Putin's massive army.
So kind of going off what you said, Scott, Zelensky, Lachlan, how do you think his leadership is affecting the battle? Do you think it's been good? Do you think it's been positive? And how do you think that the change in the international community has been in the way that they perceive him?
Well, from a PR standpoint, you can just look at what Zelensky's doing as very smart. The way that he has been able to conduct himself and conduct, from what we see on social media, from what he says to his foreign allies, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. When he says things like that, he's really increasing the morale of his country. He's winning the PR battle, and I don't want to say the propaganda war, but if there is a propaganda war, Ukraine is definitely winning in that, because the whole world, the entire world, aside from Russia, because Russia really is closed off right now, and the entire world is the Western world at least, is in favor of Ukraine and are willing to help them so far with sanctions and sending money and fighter jets and missiles and other things like that, giving aid to Ukraine. I think Zelensky's been doing a great job with that by pictures of him holding a rifle in the front lines as a leader. That says a lot as a leader. We saw George Bush have like some similar pictures taken of him. And I thought, that really empowered the country. I think it did the same thing, even better for Ukraine, especially when they're victims to Russia. And he's also Eastern Ukrainian, which part of Russia's, the way that they're trying to get people on the Ukrainian side to support Russia is the Eastern Ukrainian. That's, a predominantly pro-Russian region. But that's where Zelensky's from. Zelensky's also Jewish, debunking all of the Nazi claims that Putin's making against him. So he's definitely, proven. I think he's proven himself a great leader in this situation. He's the perfect guy to be in charge right now. And obviously, the things that he's saying, the things that he's doing, being in his office still, he's not hiding in a bunker. That says a lot, and it sends a strong message to Russia, and it sends a strong message to us and the rest of the world.
So kind of going off that last question, I want to pose this one to both of you. Recently, the news came out that Zelensky was going to restrict opposition parties in Ukraine, as well as kind of restrict the national media. Do you find that concerning, Scotty, or do you think that's just a natural way that the war is progressing?
I feel like we also have to look at Zelensky's point of view. He doesn't want, he wants the war to end. He doesn't want to bring in everyone, but he wants to help for his people. I feel like, he's not a natural. I feel like he's a natural-born leader. Look what he's done. But he also doesn't have, I'm not saying he needs the political views or anything like that, but, he's never really ran a whole nation like this. And, not many people, like even if we were under attack, we don't have, the men that served back in World War II or, some of the leaders we had for Afghanistan. So I feel like we just have to look at, he's there in action. What if that's what he thinks, maybe that's what we have to follow with.
And that is a great point. Just very few people have really had to deal with this at the level that he has. I want to throw it to you as well, Lachlan. Do you find that concerning, or is it a necessity for wartime?
I do find it concerning. We've seen this in some ways in America during our wars in the 19th and 20th centuries. However, we're starting to transition away from that. I'd hope we are. I think it is dangerous to limit other parties. The issue that I see here is Zelensky, the main party that he is restricting, the largest opposition party, the For Life Party, they're pro-Russia, and their leader actually spoke out against the Russian aggression. He's against what they are doing right now. And I think, I mean, even then, that could be used in a politically beneficial way for Zelensky. I don't know why, he needs to continue to restrict them, especially if there are people. I mean, and I'm not trying to be a sympathizer here for Russia, but I mean, if you look at, there are people in Ukraine that are Russian. There are people in Ukraine that speak Russian. And that Putin is unfortunately using those people as kind of his way of getting in and saying, like, we're doing this for a morally just cause. But, there are people in Ukraine who, are Russian. And I think that does impact, these parties represent those people. And those people might get marginalized. They might get treated badly because, of this. And I don't know if this is going to, in the long run, end up working out for Ukraine. Might cause a lot more civil unrest and actually might be counterproductive due to the division in Ukraine. So I don't know if I'm a huge fan of that.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap this segment, just one more piece of news that broke. India kind of making big waves last week, saying they're going to buy discounted Russian oil. I'm going to throw it to both of you guys again. Start with you, Scotty. Do you think that this is going to have a big impact on the international economy? And do you expect other countries to kind of follow suit as fuel prices continue to go up?
I mean, as if I was a leader and I had to like make decisions like that, I mean, obviously, like, thinking about it, like, trying to, like, do the logical way, like, I would want my country to stay thriving. I see United States, everywhere you look, gas prices are rising. That I don't foresee them stopping anytime soon. So, like, trying to maybe help out, like, the country. I mean, India's leader, trying to make that decision, like, hey, we don't really want to help Russia. We don't really want to fund them. But if you look at it in the, like, the logical way, I mean, if their country starts, struggling, maybe they already weren't even getting that much already. I mean, in the long run, I mean, that might just help keep their country thriving. And I mean, if our prices keep going up, I mean, we're gonna have to soon find a different way, because eventually we're gonna be paying $20, maybe more per gallon to even try to like get gas, and no one's gonna be able to afford that unless you're making a lot of money. So I mean, I feel like other countries might soon follow along if the war keeps progressing. But I feel like if the war slowly stops and I guess come to like a civil agreement or something like that, I foresee maybe countries trying to find a different way to keep Russia out of it. But I feel like India is just kind of like a neutral country. So like they're just like, hey, we're just trying to keep going.
Right. Lachlan, do you want to just briefly add your input to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect the United States to do that. I'm going to give an American perspective here. And from a political perspective, I think this is actually a dream for the Biden administration. I mean, they've been trying to wean us off of fossil fuel consumption, and I think this is part of that. However, I don't know if I agree with this move. I think it's definitely harmful, and I'm not going to go too deep into my opinion here, but it is going to be harmful with gas prices. It's going to keep going up, and we're going to see that, especially since we're not going to open the pipeline. That's going to cause some more issues with gas prices. We're going to end up having to transition away from that. With how it's going, and that's what they want. That's what Build Back Better. Part of that is for the environment, and I do see that working out for the Biden administration. I see them, using this as an opportunity to, push that agenda of trying to move away from that. And not that I disagree with that. I mean, that's their political move. However, it is going to spell danger for a lot of Americans, especially in our automobile-dependent society where everyone needs to buy gas. It's not something we can just stop using.
Well, thanks, guys. After the break, we'll bring you a previously recorded interview with Joe Shepard, the president of the United Rural Democrats, up next.
Rough day, huh? Hey, rough day, huh? Maybe this will make you feel better. I made some apple fritters. Welcome home.
Thank you. I really needed this today.
Welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. Joining us today is Joe Shepard, the president of the United Rural Democrats. Joe, thanks for being here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's start with some background. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the United Rural Democrats and how this all got started?
Of course. So I guess my political beginning comes with the fact that, the American worker has been, for the last few decades, on the decline. My family's fortune went down with the fortune of the Indiana steel industry. So before I even got into politics, I knew that I wanted to commit my life to helping regular people really seek out the best life that they can. And that found its way eventually to the political world. So URD was born after I ran 2 congressional campaigns, one United States Senate campaign in Iowa, my home state, and one in Wisconsin for the U.S. House. And seeing that, it was evident that one of 2 things. There are a lot of people who feel left out and left behind by the current political equation or order, and that the leadership of the Democratic Party nationally is either unwilling or unable to properly assess the situation. Now, after we have done a fair amount of research and discussion, I think it's more a lack of awareness rather than an unwillingness to help, and we want to be assistance.
So how long has URD been in existence?
We were founded in September of 2020.
Sure. And what have you accomplished during that time in that history?
So we started out doing a lot of voter contact. I have personally traveled to 46 states, traveled 100,000 miles. I actually reached the 100,000 mile mark on my Honda this morning. And, I've just talked to people asking them what they think is wrong with not only the country, but their community. And I think that critically, there are just people out there from Paiute, Utah to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who feel left out and left behind. And when somebody like Donald Trump came in and offered them a different vision for America, for better or for worse, a lot of people took a chance on it. And I think that, we've been just getting out there and saying, there is a democratic alternative. There is an alternative that is better for all of us. Because when we all do better, we all do better. And in Louisiana last year, URD reached approximately 100,000 voters. And although we didn't win any of the races we were involved in, we did see swings of 12 and 14% respectively. I guess I'll tell you a little story and then we can kind of get into what we're doing now. And that is that I was in Grant Parish, Louisiana, which is a very Republican, very rural parish in the state. And I was knocking on doors for one of the candidates. And I come across this old man, and he's like, Democrat? Hell yeah! We haven't seen you guys in 25 years. I'll go out and vote for you. And that old man voted for a Democrat. And it just goes to show that, people, I'm 20 years old. I'm relatively young. I know this is a college, publication. But there are people who have not been reached by a political force in my lifetime. So it just shows that there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table.
Well, I'm glad we were the ones to get you over that 100,000 mile mark. That's probably a pretty
Absolutely.
special milestone. But kind of going off that last answer you gave, what are some specific areas of need that you see that need to be solved, and what can you guys do to solve them?
So I think the critical piece is fundraising. A lot of wonderful candidates out there, from county commissioner all the way up to the U.S. Senate, have all of the drive. They love their community. They're respected by the people in their community. They understand the needs of what their county or district need. They just don't have the money to compete. So one of URD's goals in this cycle and beyond is to provide a fundraising conduit for campaigns that are running great candidates but need a little extra help. And I've talked to people in New York and Maryland and California, and it's very clear that a lot of big Democratic donors would love to invest in Southwest Pennsylvania or Indiana or Arkansas or rural races everywhere. The problem is they don't know where to send the checks. Because if you're a first-time state legislative candidate or a first-time candidate for local office, odds are you're not going to have those big donor friends on the coasts who can help bankroll your campaign. So it's important that when we run races, we may not win them all, but we're going to be as equipped as possible in the fight.
So you kind of mentioned one of the priorities is fundraising. Are there any other priorities you have for this cycle nationwide?
I think it's just about sort of reestablishing our presence. There's a lot of people out there who, they don't love the Republican Party. They don't love various leaders in it. But they'll vote Republican because the idea of what a Democrat is has been warped in their head. This sounds almost foreign to me, but I think we also have to almost re-normalize Democrats in the sense that, even in communities where Joe Biden got 40% of the vote, the people there act like a Democrat hasn't existed there in 100 years, like it's an extinct species. And it's very important to point out to people that, we go to the same church on Sunday and the same, Friday night football games. We're part of the community. And I think that if we can continue to do that, eventually, over time, it'll be a lot harder to pigeonhole us as gun grabbers and baby killers.
So let's make it a little more local. So what part do you think Pennsylvania is going to play in the 2022 midterms, and how do you plan on being involved in that race?
Absolutely. Well, with rural voters in particular, and also Rust Belt voters in places like Erie, I think Pennsylvania is a critical state for not just 2022, but an overall bellwether of where this country is going electorally. Obviously, Joe Biden won the state on huge turnout in Allegheny and Philadelphia counties. But if he had not done as well as he had done in some rural counties, he would have lost the state to Donald Trump. So it's critical that although we may not win rural counties in 2022 or 2024, we cannot continue to lose this death by 1,000 cuts. So what we have to do is continue to organize and fundraise in every county in the Commonwealth, because there are many counties in this state that are, including the one we're sitting in right now, Greene, that are going to be difficult to win. But we can't just surrender them. And I think that is the critical point with a lot of rural counties moving forward.
I'm going to focus in on one point specifically on your website. One thing that you mentioned is you want to send Mike Kelly home, and Mike Kelly is the Republican currently representing Pennsylvania's 16th district. Why are you focusing on him specifically?
So there's that old saying that, where there is banality, there is evil. And I think that while Mike Kelly has been fairly, inoffensive compared to the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene or Paul Gosar or Jim Jordan, he is also a great problem in this country, as he was one of the leaders in the Pennsylvania versus Texas lawsuit. And because of that, he may be, a mild-mannered, nice guy. He is actively, through his actions in the 2020 election and beyond, has been sawing at the foundation of this country. And I think that if we can defeat people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, which appears to be relatively unlikely given her district, we can also go after people who may not be as bombastic, but are just as problematic to our country. And although it is a tough district, Pennsylvania 16 is trending away from Democrats. We did get within 3 points in 2018. So I think that if we can really ratchet up turnout in Erie County, and then, continue to organize, particularly in Butler County, which is very slowly turning towards the Democrats, I do think that we can eventually send somebody like Mike Kelly home. And it's more about making a statement that, obviously in 2022, there's going to be a lot of races that make a lot of news. But there are over 10,000 races across this country, from dog catcher to governor. And I think that we need to really point out together that although there are bomb throwers on Fox News and OAN and Newsmax, they're a very loud minority. But there is a silent, larger minority of people who are equally part of the problem. And that's why we want to target Mike Kelly.
So earlier you kind of mentioned Greene County, and Greene County is obviously a pretty Republican area. It went over 70% for Trump in 2020, but we're represented in the state house by a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So what kind of messaging do you think is successful in areas like Greene County to get Democratic leaders elected locally, even if the county goes for the Republican presidential candidate?
I think it's pretty simple. I can't say that I necessarily know the answer on Greene County specifically, but I think that the overarching answer is we need to develop local brands. One of the reasons that Pam Snyder has been able to survive, despite Donald Trump winning this county by, I believe, nearly 40 points in 2020, is the fact that Pam Snyder, who I'm sad to hear is retiring, has a strong local brand. It's really hard to go after somebody with the normal Democratic attack points of, they're all beholden to Pelosi or AOC or any of these things, if that particular candidate is well known in their community. We need more candidates like Pam Snyder and Frank Burns and Scott Conklin, who are respected on their own terms in their community. That is ultimately the way we take back not only rural communities, but communities across the country of any size. Because although perhaps the National Democratic Party might not fully understand how to win Greene County, it's very clear that Pam Snyder does after being reelected 4 times. So the ultimate answer is to create that local brand. As I said, Democrats may not be a majority here, but it's very clear that they're part of the community. And I think that if we continue to push with that message into the future, we will have an excellent chance at taking back rural and small town communities over the next few cycles.
So we'll just kind of end on a look towards the future. in 10 to 20 years, where do you want to see the United Rural Democrats?
Well, my hope is starting in 2024, I'd like to really start recruiting candidates. Obviously, we're a relatively new organization and we're just getting our fundraising apparatus off the ground. But I would really like to be able to go into communities and be like, hey, this guy is somebody who understands what the community needs. He's been a fixture in it, a local football coach or a pastor or whatever, and get people like that to run. Because the thing is, it costs millions of dollars to flip a congressional seat. It only takes tens of thousands to flip a state house seat. So I think that if we can, over the next few election cycles, cultivate more local brands, local leaders, local images, that is how we can ultimately turn the tide back in rural America, because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And I think the faster that we collectively as Democrats come to that determination, the faster we can turn back the clock, because we are reaching a point where if we continue on this road, there may not be a path of return in the future. So I am always hopeful, but the time to act is now.
Sure. Well, as always, Joe, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you making that long travel out to see us.
My pleasure.
The Waynesburg Effect will continue after this. The United States Senate has passed a bill to make daylight savings time a permanent fixture. As we close things out today, I want to once again go to my panel to discuss the new law. Scott, let's just cut to the chase. Is this a good idea or not?
Yeah, I think getting rid of daylight savings is, it's good. I want to be honest, probably 90% of Americans don't even understand what this is. I feel like, most people, if you say to them, like, they're like, hey, did you know we got an extra hour? And they're just like, what? Or you tell them like, hey, we have to set our clocks back or forward. Most of them don't even understand. And to be honest with you, I didn't even really know what the whole point of it was until I looked up a little bit. I just know that it started in 1918. We copied Germany and Britain during World War I, war times and stuff like that. So we were just trying to help with the daylight and stuff. But I feel like we get rid of it. Honestly, no one knows what it is. I've never met someone that said they really liked it. I feel like just to save time and save Americans, I think we just cut it out.
Lachlan, there's been some controversy, people saying that instead of making daylight savings time permanent, we should just cut it and make standard time permanent. What's your opinion? Do you think that is there a better way of doing this?
Yeah, I think it's really complex actually, because of geography. It's not just, obviously the sun moves like around the earth, but it's weird. Like, I don't understand how this works, because like to me it would just seem like the sun would just go, the sun would rise and set just depending on where you are on the hemisphere or whatever. But it's not like that. Like, if you go out west, let's say Seattle and Las Vegas is the example, the sun sets an hour later, I guess the sun rises is the better thing here. The sun rises an hour later in Seattle, and I believe they're are they on the same time zone? Which I think they might be. It's over an hour at least in the Pacific or on the west. And even if you go to the east, then now in the northeast we get a very interesting perspective, because it's not as much of an issue here, because I think the reason daylight savings time is still around, and the reason that we aren't doing a full daylight savings time, because we actually tried that in the 70s, a full daylight savings time year-round. is because kids going to school at 9 in the morning, it's still dark out. And that's more, it's not so much an issue in the Northeast, we've noticed. It's more of an issue out west. And it's especially down south too in Miami. Compared to Miami and Boston, the sun rises in like with an hour difference, both in the Eastern time zone. That's a better example than the Seattle, Nevada one, because we're in the Eastern time zone. We see the sun rise at a different time than, you know, everyone else. So it's really weird. And honestly, from what we see in the Northeast, it's not nearly the same as what other people see. And the people took a poll on it. I forget who it was, but there was a poll that was one of the sources you gave us. All had different views. It was completely divided. And I know the Senate, I think it was the Senate, they recently gave it the green light to keep it full time, which we would like up here. But, you know, that might be dangerous for kids going to school pitch black at 6 in the morning. So I don't know. It's a really complicated issue, and I don't know much about you know, the Earth's axis and the sun and everything orbiting around. But I do know that, you know, it's too complicated for us to have like a right or wrong answer.
Oh, for sure. And again, it's always good to close on like a positive and lighthearted note after, you know, all the heavy discussion we had.
Yeah.
And as always, guys, I appreciate your input today. You can catch all of the episodes of the Waynesburg Effect on our YouTube channel at WCTV Waynesburg University. From all of us here at the Waynesburg Effect, thank you for watching.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.